Okay.
Just a second, so I'm going to send us live. You've done it so many times, haven't you?
Oh.
There we go, we're live, Chair.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for People. I'm William J. Rowley, the chair of today's committee. We are subject to the Welsh Government Act of 2021 regarding the hybrid meeting, and can I remind members that we are bound by our code of conduct, the same as we were if we were here in person as we were at home. Can I remind members at home to put up their hands if they wish to speak and come in when it's indicated to do so. So moving on from that, any apologies for absence?
No apologies, Chair.
Declarations of interest.
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor Deb
Yes.
Jenkins have given me her apologies.
Thank you. Okay, any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the last meeting on pages 3 to 4. Do we have a mover? Thank you. Carmel. And the seconder. John, thank you. Okay. Okay. Item 4, which is on page 5. The scrutiny key stage 4 outcomes report for 2025. Cabinet member, you going to take us through this?
I will just do it open.
And then what we're going to do after is?
I will move to my colleague Sarah and Sarah to take the questions.
And we will ask you as well to answer questions.
Absolutely.
Because I know you can, and I don't want to ignore you. I want you to be your it's a good team. It's a good team. Thank you, Cabinet member.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again for the invitation to attend scrutiny. You're pleased to be here today to present the stage 4 all Wales core data sets at the individual school level. Each of the previous years used essentially different methods for determining grades, so none of these are directly comparable. In 2025, national outcomes are generally slightly higher than 2024, but lower than 2023. They're now broadly similar to 2019, which is pre-COVID. Provisional outcomes are made available to schools, local authorities, and in provisional form in late October 2025. Please be assured this report uses the final versions. All Wales core data sets are designed to be used at school level to allow school leaders to use the data as part of their own internal whole school evaluation processes to support school improvement. For example, data should be considered alongside the outcomes of a broad range of first-hand evidence of pupil progress and standards. For example, book looks and learning walks. It's important to note that school data raises questions rather than definitive answers, and therefore this information should therefore be used sensitively with the context of each school, rather than making direct comparisons for accountability purposes. And I don't want this to be the intention of today's meeting. Each school has been placed within a category, and this is known as their family, and this reflects their own context, which includes the consideration of the number of children who are eligible for preschool meals, as well as taking into account whether a child of school age lives in an area of deprivation, as defined by the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. This recognises that children across Wales face different challenges based on their own context. This enables comparative outcomes to be considered in this context and provides more accurate analysis of examination results. It's also important to consider that these results need to be considered in the context of 3-year trends. I'm not yet there. I hope that you find this paper insightful, and we look forward to your questions this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, and this committee will scrutinise in its usual fashion, which will be helpful and insightful to those three members of the public who are watching at home, as well as ourselves. So I'm sure that not our colleagues on there, there's another three tuning in apparently. So there we go. Are there any, Sarah, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sorry, that's okay. I can see you were involved in your own then.
Chair, I have nothing to add, but we're happy to answer questions, and really important, Sarah, is
Yes.
here to take committee as our school improvement
Yes.
to the organisation.
Yeah, welcome, Sarah. So we have two Sarahs today. There we go. Okay, we're going to go through. So on page 9. The opening page, and we'll go page by page, and then if anybody wishes to come in, we can. Page 10. Page 10.
Chair, on the background,
Yeah.
the pension, it's a 3-year. At the moment, how are we actually looking in regards to completing that 3-year plan? Because we've got 24, 25, obviously next year 26, and that'll be the 3-year plan. So is the trend on the up, or flatlining, or going down?
Okay, so in terms of the trend, it depends what indicators you're looking at. So if you want to look at it at a school level, we can see an improving trend in our literacy outcomes across Newport. We can see an improving trend from the last year, but it's hardly a trend, but it's year on year. And that's the difference in using the word trend. We're only looking at two distinctive cohorts. So we know, and yourselves as governors will know, that groups of learners, cohorts of learners will differ. So it isn't a trend, and that's why we've got to be reluctant. But we are seeing, if you just compare year on year, which is not accurate and not appropriate, we are seeing an upward trajectory for literacy, numeracy. We're maintaining standards in science, and we've got good performance against the Welsh Baccalaureate in those schools that actually do the Welsh Baccalaureate. And also in terms of our children who are leaving school with no qualifications, we are doing better year on year with that. And also we've got good performance A star A, but it's not a trend, it's just comparing one cohort with another, which is not a good measure of improvement.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Reynolds in, on the cap 9, there could be a concern that some of the figures could be distorted or influenced by the entry policies of the school. Do you want to?
Not at Key Stage 4.
Okay.
Entry qualifications would be at post 16, and in Newport we're working collectively as part of a collaboration to ensure that entry criteria is similar or identical across all schools. That's a piece of work that's in train, but that's Key Stage 5, not Key Stage 4.
Yes, please.
In terms of Cap 9, there is no gameplay in terms of entry levels because it accounts for every single grade. So it's, when we used to look at older measures which were based on C's and above, that might not have necessarily reflected every single learner and their achievement at every single level. Cap 9 does, because it looks right at every single learner throughout the, and we expect every single child to be entered in examinations. That's the whole purpose of Cap 9, that it looks at everybody in every grade.
Thank you. John, Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Forgive me because I couldn't quite pick up what Sarah Morgan was saying at the beginning. I was expecting a little bit of a presentation of the report, but I'm gathering we've gone straight into questions. So my apologies, Sarah, for not picking up what you said at the beginning. I've got a few questions. They're not necessarily page related, Chair, so I might be jumping in and out a few times if that's okay with you. Some of my questions are more sort of general rather than specific points on certain pages. But one thing I would like to ask straight away, It's to do with the interpretation of the figures and the statistics. I just want to clarify for my own purposes, really. I mean, I'll give you an example. On page 14 of the report, School 4 there appears to be performing half a grade below the norm for every pupil. I think that's been stated. When I read the figures, I interpreted that slightly differently. I read it as being each pupil performing at a whole grade below the norm in half of their subjects. So is that a valid interpretation or a valid alternative interpretation? The reason I'm saying that is, I mean, the chair mentioned this in the pre-meeting. If we had a cohort of pupils that were, say, 200 strong, that would equate to roughly 100 grades overall throughout that cohort, lower than the norm. So can I just clarify that use of statistics? I can't say the word statistics, please. Thank you, Chair.
I think it's a supportive way to present information for you in context, so it gives you a sense of performance, both at over where schools are performing better than the Welsh Government model estimate and where schools may be falling short. So it's a contextualised one rather than a statistically valid one, if I put it that way. So I think it's to give you context rather than to have any real statistical value.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, sir, I think it's a bit of a delay. I keep talking across you. Apologies.
Sorry, my fault. So, what I meant to say was, whilst we can talk about half a grade below, what I wouldn't do is aggregate up the data to describe it as 100 grades less. That statistically certainly wouldn't add up. No. And that's why it's not statistically valued, it's contextual.
Can I push you on that again, because a lot of members, and I read this myself, and you speak about this half a GCSE grade below, and the significance of half a C grade below could influence. You see, if you read it one way, it could be a systematic to an underperformance. So if you have a family, so you're in your family group, and you got one school performing a half a grade below the rest of the family, that could be systemic to something going on in that school, or could it be that the other schools are performing well above, and these just haven't benchmarked up? How am I to, you see, because I can't really get to grips with this information.
But one of the overarching headlines of this is that this isn't a report for punitive action. This report is around self-evaluation, so that you can ask yourselves the questions as a school. If I was to look at my comparative data with my family, with Welsh Government model expectations, if I looked at previous cohorts in my school, it's raising questions around, can we stretch our pupils further? What are we doing well at in some subject areas, which can, that good practice can be harvested and used in other subject areas for school improvement purposes? And that's the whole reason why we look at these measures, purely to drive school improvement and to ask ourselves all such questions. What is it that's making a difference? Why are we overperforming in that area, underperforming potentially in this? What is it?
I think that goes back to bullet point 1.2. It's about these raising questions, and it is only one element of a school's data collection, and it doesn't give a complete picture. And that's where the accountability movement, we move away from high stakes accountability, because this really does not paint an accurate picture of how effective a school is without the wider context and without the data that Councillor Davies alluded to, which is looking at pupils' books, looking at listening to your learners, stakeholder surveys, lesson observations and that sense of what the quality of the provision is and how that drives the progress.
And another example, Chair, is because this is based on a pupil cohort, that outcome could demonstrate really satisfactory progress for that learner or for that group of learners. This doesn't determine what their background is. It doesn't describe whether they've got additional learning needs. It doesn't describe any disadvantage they might have had in a background. It just raises questions about what the school can do better or what
Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I just wanted to sort of come follow up on my previous question, really, and the comments that have been made. Because I certainly don't want to give the wrong impression that I'm looking to overly criticise, because some of my questions that I've got for later on are actually turning it completely on its head. There's a lot of data in there that is very positive, and one of my questions was going to be about how we interpret that data and find the reasons behind the positive results, and how we then share that good practice and help schools that maybe are struggling a bit more. But on a more sort of general level, could I just make a suggestion? Whether the rest of the committee would agree with this, I don't know, but the report is very, very data heavy, and even as somebody who's spent over 2 decades in teaching myself, I had to read it and reread it and reread it, and even then I was still struggling to come to like valid conclusions myself on the data that I was reading. I was sort of turning myself in knots, to be honest. I'm just wondering, would it be worth possibly putting some sort of executive summary or a layman's guide at the beginning, just to give a summary of the main findings and the main conclusions of what this data actually shows, because it is very difficult to interpret. That's just my own opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Possible, Chair, I think that would be helpful, but what I think might be even more helpful is that Welsh Government are actually looking at this and looking at how they report data to enable the general public actually to be able to access this data, which is very complicated. The cap line itself is a very complex measure to understand and to understand how it's calculated. So I'm hoping as we move forward, we'll have a more streamlined, more easily interpreted and accessible set of data, but we can definitely put something up at the front of this report in the future.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm lost with this paper, if I'm honest, really lost. However, that said, we do as governors go to school, we do the book looks, we walk around the school, we go in the classrooms and we oversee lessons just as a drop-in, drop-out kind of thing, and we see it for ourselves, because you can have pages and pages and pages of documents. You need to be in the building and see and feel and touch exactly what these children are learning, which I have to say, you ladies, you know what, it's going to come out of my mouth. The ASD ALM base at Lamwyn High is absolutely second to none. It's a fantastic service. You walk in, there's children of all different abilities, and they're all doing really, really well. And if you're ever really down in the dumps, take a walk around one of them classrooms. I defy you to come out with a big grin on your face because of the way those children are and the way the teaching staff are with the children. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words you said there regarding that school. So we're not here today as governors. We're here today as a scrutiny committee. So forget that we're governors. And I understand why I take on board what people have said. If you were members of the public, now we had a pre-meeting here, and we had 9 brains or thereabouts, maybe 10, I don't know, looking at this, and everybody getting confused and thinking it's smoke and mirrors. I think it's written by a Philadelphia lawyer who you need another Philadelphia lawyer who creates things to really get to grips with this area. I could read this both ways. I could say that maybe some children are catastrophically failing, or maybe some schools are absolutely improving at such a greater rate. It doesn't help us to scrutinise properly. It doesn't lead, it's not friendly for us. So we can't really, you know, it sounds as if we're being negative and positive, and because we're confused. If we put this out to the public, they wouldn't have a Scooby-Doo of what we're on about. Because we struggle as a committee with this report. I don't know why, but you know, and you've heard it from members there. But we're gonna go through it and hopefully get to the end of it. So and with a couple of recommendations, I guess, that could be helpful.
Can I make 2 points, Joe?
Please do.
So number one, I think we share your frustrations. This is the Welsh Government's data that we are given. You must understand as well. It's not, nobody has the ability in a local authority to independently take a separate set of data that might be more helpful to understand. If we did that, there would be no local authority or Welsh Government contextual data. We should be all using something different. It was a measurement. So we're using what Welsh Government have given us. What also doesn't help is that for the right reasons, Welsh Government decided to take away the previous set of accountability data, which you would have all been used to in Scrutiny Committee, and previously found it more simplistic and straightforward to understand. So that was stopped because for the right intentions, the previous data sets were being used to as a punitive measure, but they also caused game playing across the system, across Wales, not necessarily in Newport, but across the system. For what you might see, for instance, is when we looked at the old accountability measures, they were very much focused on that C grade. So we had lots of focus around moving pupils from D to C's and all the efforts being there, rather than perhaps trying to stretch our most able students from B's to A stars, which everybody deserves to be stretched, don't they, in their progression to be noticed and to perform at their best ability. So old system had unintended consequences. There was a hiatus on data for quite a while. We were told that this is the data set we can use, so it's not within our budget, it's something different. Okay, so we understand your frustrations. I suppose the second aspect I could suggest is that we have a scrutiny workshop, perhaps in lieu of a paper, which might be more helpful around doing some shared collaborative discussion and learning to go alongside the paper.
This was going to be one of the recommendations coming from this committee, because we need a greater understanding of the language that is being spoken here. You know, what been said earlier, we all speak NHS, different language, you know that. Education, different language. Politics, different language. I mean, we need to understand that language.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we're not governors here. However, where I understand and know this data from students, was as a school government in the secondary school, when you're looking at, you know, when they brought the Cap9 principles in, it's hard to absorb and hard to understand. It's hard for teachers to understand and learn the pointing system and how it adds up. So for us as counsellors to come in and look at this whole, who don't necessarily have an education background, I completely concur. It's difficult. It's difficult to comprehend when you look at the point system. You think, well, how does that add up? And what does that framework look like? I would agree for those councillors who are on the scrutiny committee who want to understand that, a workshop would actually be very, very valuable. Particularly as the data set's not going to. We don't see it particularly changing going forward. There's no intent to change it. But therefore, I think there is emphasis on a better understanding.
And I think that we'll pick that up as a recommendation. Thank you, Sarah, that's very helpful. We're going to move on, page 11, and jump in. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Reynolds was talking about page 14, so I put my hand up when we talk about page 14 on there, if you don't mind. But it's just about this cap 9. It's just an understanding within that in context. So basically, there's a number of things there around per pupil and things like that there. I just wanted to confirm whether or not that's per learner, as in every learner, and or is it those that are put through examinations? Because there may be some situations where young people may not be able to go through any examinations. So it's just to understand the context of how that fits in and what this means. Just to as I said, it is a hard one to register. So just to clarify. Thank you.
Is everybody, Councillor Marshall?
It's every child, so it's linked in. So even if they don't sit an assessment, they're still within the numbers here.
If they didn't turn up on the day, they would receive a U grade, and so yes, that would be counted in the cap 9. Yeah.
And so every child has to go through assessments, because I know in the past, hence the question is, a number of young people were not put through assessments because they may fail or have an underachievement grade. So it's just to understand where that situation is, and or potentially then move them to a like for like grade, not necessarily, or equivalent grade even, so not necessarily GCSE, but an equivalent MVQ or similar.
To the best of my knowledge, when I speak to individual schools, we go through their results. It is every school, every child in the school from that cohort that should go through.
And that was the problem with the previous system. And that's why I had certain schools were managing the system for better outcomes by not actually putting people who they thought would fail and not get the C grade. They would potentially mask that by not actually putting them in, entering them, make sure there's someone else on the particular day. Not necessarily Newport, absolutely, I'm not saying that, but where you had schools particularly manipulating the system, that's where you've got those inequalities and those outcomes. And this is fairer because every child is counted.
Another good example of that is the way the Eston check a local authority. So when pupil number cohorts are recorded on PLASC, which is our data system, for instance, let's say for instance in the September before the GCSEs are sat, if the cohort moves from, let's say, 3,000 pupils to 2,990, they ask us what has happened to those 10 pupils. It's because theoretically they would want to know if there was any type of gameplay going on. Yeah. What they've consistently noted in Newport previously is that there has been an individual breakdown of any pupils that might have moved out of the area as an example of how that would be acceptable for the cohort size to have reduced in some way. I believe that is not so, that there are greater proportions previously, I'm talking many years ago, when perhaps there was some of those unusual practices that might have happened. It doesn't happen here. We've kept abreast of that, and so you can see how the cohort sizes are checked.
Thank you for that clarity, Sarah, and it's positive to hear there are safeguards in play as well, so I do appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Just a second, Councillor Watkins.
Some Cap 9 ones, in general, are we looking at those that have good practice, and are we sharing it with others who are struggling, and how are we actually doing that?
So we've got multiple ways. Also, we've got our local authority school improvement service, we've got our school improvement partners, and we've got secondary head teachers who are school improvement partners. So one of our school improvement partners is an ex St Joseph's High School head teacher. Another one is the ex-head of Fitzallen High School in Cardiff, both high-performing schools. They are working directly with our schools across the city. We've also established a peer review system in our secondary sector, which we're piloting this year, where we've got senior leaders and mid-leaders working across all schools to share strong practice and to look to identify where they could work more collaboratively across our secondary sector as the middle and senior leaders to drive improvement. And we've also got what we call our team around partner schools. So some of you will be familiar with the partner school model in our primary sector. Well, that extends to our secondary sector. So our schools would be working. So for example, Fuddiant is a partner school and it works with another school across the city. That the head of Fuddiant is the school department. The school is a partner school, so they benefit from the expertise in areas from Fuddiant, and they go and see live practice and work in partnership with practitioners. Because to effect change, we've got to deliver change at the talk phase in the classroom where direct teaching and learning happens. So those things are really strong in report, they're well embedded. The peer pilot is well established in our primaries, that now is extended into our secondaries, and we're monitoring the impact of that work this year.
Because the family, I'm aware of the partner family. In some cases, that one school is doing better in one subject than another, and vice versa. Possibly one is doing better in maths and the other one's doing better in English, so they can another. But you mentioned that one school improvement was from Cardiff.
Yes.
That it doesn't show this in regards to the Cap 9, it's all Newport schools.
Yes, but what's interesting about the having a partner, a school improvement partner from Cardiff, is that that head teacher was from a family of schools where Newport schools exist. So when you go down to the family of schools information,
Yeah, it's on page 11 to 13.
this particular school improvement partner has been matched up because the school is within that family and has a really similar community catchment area and pupils. So there's so much in common to be gained from those two schools working together.
And the other thing is the family, the attention of families when families were first brought in as a comparator was that schools would work together across Wales in those families. Because we've got such a well-developed partnership approach across the region, and particularly Newport, schools are making less use of those family connections, but they are still working with those families. So schools will identify on their data sets where there is strength, for example, in literacy, they were underperforming in literacy, they would look where the high performing schools in their family are, they'll have the family data, and then they would make those connections and potentially have reciprocal visits and do some reciprocal work with those schools within their family. But that would be driven by the school rather than something the local authority would be driving on behalf of the schools.
So would they have access to other schools within the family? Not necessarily.
Yeah, and they'd have the data, because when they have their data sets, the family is shown, so they would be able to identify where the strengths are within that family data for specific subjects. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I understand. Well, it's not just solely
No.
NCC.
No, absolutely not.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to carry on the Cap 9 theme if I could. I was going to ask a question as well about sharing good practice, but I think Sarah's comments to Councillor Watkins has just covered that, so I won't waste committee time on that now. But with the Cap 9 measure, I think Sarah Morgan partially covered this a bit earlier anyway, but there is reference in the report about a practice, possibly previous practice, of schools not entering pupils for unsuitable subjects just to improve their school Cap 9 score. I'm just wondering, is there any evidence that that's either been happening in the recent past or even now? And if so, what has been done about that to stop that happening?
There's no evidence that I'm aware of, Councillor Reynolds. And Cap 9 itself, because it's looking at 9 subject areas, is demonstrating those young people are entered for 9 subjects. If you were to focus just on level 2 inclusive, which was an old measure, it was 5 GCSEs, C's to A stars.
Yeah.
And so it was only looking at 5. Cap9 is given the reassurance that it is looking at a broad range of subject areas, a higher volume of GCSEs, and one of the questions when we go to our secondary schools and have in-depth discussions about their exam results is around, was everybody entered? We're able to look at the cohort size of exam entries against the pupil admission number in year 10 and year 11, for instance.
And another thing that we would be checking when we meet with our secondary schools as a quality assurance, and we haven't had this problem, is where we've got our more able pupils, for example, we wouldn't be expecting to see them entered for things like SWEET, which would be counted within the Cap9. We'd be expecting those learners who might not be able to access other GCSE subjects, accessing those kind of qualifications. So if we saw a school where they were entering all students for a qualification, for example, the SWEET qualification, we would be asking why, because that would not be appropriate for our more able learners, and that would suggest game playing, and we've got no evidence in that in Newport because we have that level of conversation with our schools every year.
Sarah, what was that?
It's the SWEET qualification.
Okay.
Don't ask me to describe it.
Okay.
No, I do understand that the Cap9 is a more rigorous model than the previous regime. So, but those checks you just described, that's really what I was waiting to hear, to be honest. That those checks and that sort of analysis is done at the school level, and obviously it is. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go from page 14, 15, 16, and 17, 18, 19, 20.
19, Chair, if I may.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 22, I think. Yeah. I mean, on page 19, I'm looking at this. Maybe you could tell me what's being done to improve the numeracy, where 4 schools remain below their family average on numeracy.
Depends on the school, because each, as I said, the results would be based on asking questions, raising questions about what is the practice like in your school. This could be linked to a whole host of things. It could be style of teaching and learning. It could be potentially a lack of cohesiveness in the coordination of assessment at various points during the year, which doesn't give enough evidence of appropriate feedback to pupils and interventions. So I can give you a range of examples of things that have, of school improvements, themes that have emerged before now, but it is very dependent upon picking each secondary school's mathematics department, and that's why heads of maths and the maths team will sit around together and they will diagnose why they believe those results occurred and whether they're performing well contextually or weaker than perhaps they should be, and they're looking for those points to improve, but they're often doing that as well with perhaps potentially a school improvement partner, so there's an external perspective, because otherwise sometimes you can't always see what you're not doing. You can't potentially always do what you've always done, so the external person coaching and supporting can give valuable insights and can support with your quality assurance.
Okay.
But I can't give you it's not a one-size-fits-all necessarily.
Okay, but you see, just to say, now you see the difficulty. We cannot scrutinise these figures based upon not being able to ascertain an answer, because it's so big,
Yes.
and it's so fluid.
Yes.
and there's no answer.
No.
And this is how can we can't scrutinise it. And that's the contradiction we got here.
But what I can do is I can give you assurances as a committee that if there is any school that it appears that there is room for improving their numeracy measure, for example, that we work with each secondary school individually based on their own needs. That's important. And we know then that number one, school is identifying their needs around improvement in a subject area in their school development plan. Yeah. We also know that we're checking each school to make sure they've got appropriate monitoring and evaluation systems in place to make sure that if they've got something in their school improvement plan that they're pinpointing for improvement, that it's followed up and they demonstrate impact, they demonstrate improvement.
And we're also working with schools in terms of where we feel there's underperformance. We're actually doing teaching and learning reviews around that subject area to really get to the granular reasons of why this is happening. And we will support schools if there is underperformance, because if there's underperformance, we need to support schools to tackle underperformance, because that might be one reason. It could be another reason that they've got long-term sickness absence in that particular area, and then we would be supporting around that. So you're right, there's so many multifaceted reasons why we might have 1 year or 2 years underperformance, and that's why not having a trend doesn't help.
That was the question which I was going to put, Chair, in regards to, do you actually select a school and then, let's say, go down the ladder, finish, find out the reason of why it's not, and possibly another school, that why is it performing so well? Because of this, and that school is not performing because they haven't got the...
A good example of those sessions would be that we go around each secondary school in Newport in early autumn term. And we are in a secondary school as the first initial meeting before support is brokered. We've been at school for 3.5 hours, going through results, looking at previous performance, looking at what the school believes has been, where there's room for improvement. We're sat with school improvement partners. We're looking at, do we need to do more investigation into that specific subject area to support? We're putting together a bespoke support plan based on that individual school, because they would all have different needs and different good practice to share.
And we do keep digging and digging until we find what we believe to be the issue, to ensure that the school is addressing that specific issue.
Not necessarily the issue, the good practice.
Yeah, a good practice.
Well, the good practice,
And then can be shared.
the good practice is really well shared across.
Yeah.
And the peer partnership, particularly around numeracy, because I know a number of schools have chosen the numeracy element. That is about us building those networks of strong practice across the city. We're using it more broadly across the region, but also those networks in the city, because we're such a geographically small city that allows for really effective school working. So we want to build that capacity.
Can I add that? Because I've previously been a chair of governors in secondary school, and I know what that meeting feels like. It is forensic, it is uncomfortable, and it's designed to be, because there is
Not finding it uncomfortable. All I'm concerned about is down to the nitty-gritty.
It's designed to be, because what there's an expectation of is the school knows their data. They know their children. They know that the targets they've set for outcomes are realistic, and if they haven't met those targets, why not? That meeting will take up to 3 hours, maybe longer, because it's that forensic and it's that detail, because it's about those children. Those outcomes matter. You know, a school has to invest in those children. It's their best opportunity. It's their only opportunity to actually get there and take that next step into the adult world. So these meetings are taken really, really, really seriously. As a chair of governors sitting in that seat, as chair of governors, it's an entirely different place to sit in Cabinet of Education. It's not an easy place to be, because it is that level of forensic detail, understanding success, but absolutely understanding where there might be issues of concern.
Councillor Townsend?
It's a question for whichever of the three of you.
Yeah.
What sort of data do you hold on children? Data's been mentioned a lot, so what data is held in schools or by the authority on children?
At a school level, so at a local authority level, we would have school-based data on attendance of free school meals, pupils entitled to free school meals, assistant absence data. We would have cohort data, the number of pupils. We would have the number of children that had school-based IDPs, the number of children that had LA-based IDPs, the number of children that had person-centred planning from an ALM angle. We would hold the data only on Key Stage 4 assessment, remembering that in foundation phase, the old Key Stage 2, and those end of foundation phase results, they no longer exist. We hold reading data outcomes for the local authority, but not broken down by school. That is for school-based use only. And similarly, schools would have all that on a pupil-by-pupil basis, but they would also hold assessment data which would demonstrate in subject areas, whether it's science, maths, English, other subject areas, how a child is progressing in each of those areas, giving them the ability to have reassurance that the child is making appropriate progress based on their stage, age and contextual information. Or if they're not making the appropriate progress, they're able then to hold an intervention session in order to play catch up to ensure that people have got the best possible chance of their best possible outcomes.
Yeah. And what does that data disappear when the child leaves the school?
It's still there, but it's held by the school. That's not local authority. That's not data that, for instance, the local authority is able to see.
Okay.
No. It's only used for teaching and learning practices.
But in our meetings, schools share that with us because they want to demonstrate how they're using that assessment data, that teacher assessment data, the national literacy numeracy tests they do as well, and any other national benchmark, any other benchmark data they've got. Yeah. So they use all of that to create the picture of the child and the child's progress. Yeah. I'd say nearly every school in Newport holds termly pupil progress meetings, so they share, and that's the kind of information they bring into these meetings to demonstrate learner progress to us beyond the actual GCSE.
What you want a school to be able to do is they set a pupil's target where they want them to be, and you want them to achieve that outcome. The questions get asked. If the targeting doesn't appear to be accurate, it's wonderful if a child overperforms. That's absolutely amazing. That's sort of the cherry on the cake. But if you expect that child to get an A and a B, that's what they should do. And then there has to be questions asked. You target that child to get an A and a B, and they actually get a C. Why? You know, what went wrong?
Yes. Okay.
Do we find that some schools actually under-assess so they can actually look at the data when it comes out is far greater than what they predicted?
We would need to expect the same level of challenge. So we've been looking at, for instance, what are your forecast predictions for Cat9 for this summer for year 11? So we can talk to our schools about that. When we look at autumn term results, we'll be looking at doing the comparison between what you predicted and what your outcomes were, and if we saw that there was an under prediction forecast and the real outcome was higher, then there's a lack of accuracy in tracking pupils, and so we would be asking
yes. And you'd expect your chair of governors to track that and expect those, you know, you have that data as a chair of governors, and whichever subcommittee it is that looks at that data, and those are the questions you should be asking as a governor.
Okay. So far, so good. Everybody's still smiling. Good. Page 21.
Chair, can I get some from 17 if I can come in?
We'll go back to 17, fine.
Thank you, Chair. It's about the literacy and language. So at the bottom part of it, it's just an understanding that literacy seems to have a better type of measure on there in terms of the achievements in that chart in comparison to language. And just wondering, you know, there seems to be a slight disparity between that, and is that something obviously notable in terms of language skills, and what interventions are being done to hopefully bring up the language skills alongside the literacy side of things, please?
I think for that, there's a different level of challenge within that paper. Very often the literacy can be done early. So it would be done maybe outside of the English examination cycle. So there would be more time given to that. But it's a very, very different level of challenge within that GCSE paper. The language paper is a much more challenging paper than the literacy paper is, and also I think it's the way it is actually taught as well. There's a different level of challenge in the language paper compared to a literacy paper, which is more direct teaching of text.
Do you mean literature?
The literature paper,
Literature, not literacy.
Yeah, the literature paper, yeah. Sorry. The literacy is the combining of the English and the literature, yeah, sorry, literature paper. It's a totally different level of challenge.
Can I clarify on that? Sorry, just to piggyback on that question. So, from my understanding, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the actual the literacy measure is weighted more than the language. But even you said the challenge is within the language. Would that be right on that?
Waiting to give you the literacy measure.
So, is it weighted equally or?
Yeah, weighted equally. The difference, I would suggest that the English language GCSE is a much more challenging qualification than the English literature GCSE.
An example of that is the high level of scoring based around spelling, punctuation and grammar in the language paper, which is not as apparent in the literacy paper.
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you. I was just thinking alongside that, and also the fact of those with SEN and things like that, they'll probably find that paper harder as well. But I know that's another topic in relation to that as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Let's go back to page 22. Move forward. Yes.
Why is it that some schools are not taking up the Welsh back? Is it more corporate, or do they feel the pupils to those schools?
It's personal preference. It might be they just feel that there are other GCSEs they prefer to offer. It's just timetabling, and sometimes it's also I think they come over time. Everybody had to do Welsh back. Yeah, that was the start. So everybody had to do the statutory requirement. Over time, schools have looked at the cohort of children that they're serving and have come to a decision whether that is the best use of that timetable time in their schools for their learners. Nearly all our schools do Welsh baccalaureate at Key Stage 5, however, so they're choosing not to do it at Key Stage 4, but they are doing it at Key Stage 5. And I think it's just a timetabling preference by lots of schools.
The school makes the decision.
School makes the decision. And it is increasing over time, but less schools are doing it at Key Stage 4. However, they're maintaining it at Key Stage 5. And that secures many, many students their first choice university placements.
Okay, thank you. Page 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and the final page is 28. Okay, 28. So we'll come to the end of that report.
Can I just
Yeah, please do.
How do you feel as an education authority that we're doing in regards to that paper? Are we doing well? Are we doing okay?
Well, we've got a summary in that paper. There is a summary for the report more broadly, which is, I think, probably more helpful than looking at individual schools. So in terms of Newport averages, we are above the Wales average for almost all indicators, and we are also doing well in respect to the Welsh Baccalaureate qualification and the fact that our learners are not leaving school with no qualifications, which I think is as important. We also know that we don't have differentials in terms of gender, the data we currently have. So we know that our girls and boys are performing equally as well across the city. We also know that the children who are not free school meals, performance again is above the Welsh average, and it's a strong performance for the input to be above that Welsh average. However, there's further work to do with those pupils who are entitled to free school meals. And when you look at the demographic across the city, we can see that in our schools who need to make those improvements, they probably have the highest levels of pupils with.
So you've identified where.
Yes.
Question.
And I think an important point as well is it would be perhaps easy and simplistic to report on where the local authority stands in relation to Wales. We've given you some positive headlines. But when you aggregate data to a local authority level, it can mask underperformance in specific schools, because the overachieving schools then mask the underperformance. And so today we've talked a lot about the way that we work with schools on an individual basis, and we dissect individual school results, and we put individual support plans. And I can't give you one answer that suits everybody, but that's why this is so important, because it's not, when you look at the local authority data, it looks fine, but we've got to look more deeply and forensically to make sure that each individual pupil is having the education that they deserve and need, and that we stretch everybody across the city. So that is why some of the answers I've given are already, it depends which school that we're looking at. Everything is going to be completely bespoke for that reason.
And I think it's also important to point out where we've got perceived high performance because of data in isolation, that might still not be good enough.
Yeah.
Because it's about being the very best you can be in the context that you are, and that you are achieving well or above really well at the highest levels. Because if your A-star A's in those top performing schools are not where they should be, why? It's the same conversation but at a different end of the spectrum. So we need to be driving our strong performing schools, if we look at data in isolation, to ensure that all their learners are achieving at the highest level.
So the A-star, which you've assessed at school level,
is it?
We don't want our children coasting. Absolutely, every child. I'm passionate about a child being given the best opportunity in life, and that means I want schools to be confident with their data, that they know their children, they know their targets are realistic, and they give every child that opportunity. And that's actually about not actually enabling and pushing them to achieve, and that means at every single level. I don't want children coasting either. It can't happen. They've only got one chance in life. We've got to give it to them.
Okay, thank you. I guess, thank you for the report, Sarah. It has been frustrating.
Can I come in? I did have a question, and it piggybacks off what was just noted. I did put my hand up.
Where?
On the thing.
Go on then.
Thank you very much, Chair. So it's in relation to what we were just talking about the free school meal side of things. I know it's been mentioned that some students are basically performing below the national level of their peers. I suppose while we address that and acknowledge that as an issue, it's just a kind of, can you give us ways that that's been worked upon? I know we mentioned about the school development plan earlier, but also things about what lessons we're learning from that, but also what lessons we're learning from the other areas, whether or not it be the support within families or just generally across the board. What are we learning in order to try and hopefully improve before the next report is in? Thank you.
Fundamentally, it's about improving the quality of teaching and learning in a school, because that's where everything starts. So it's demanding high quality professional learning in our schools that meet the needs of the staff
within that school, so that whether that be on a whole school level or a more targeted approach for individual staff. That well, it starts with the school improvement plan, then the professional learning is right for the individual, for the school. It might be schools adopt a bespoke approach, for example, the RADI project that we talked about before, where they focus, for example, on their free into their schools. So they're always pushing the aspiration for those young people. It's all around, as Councillor Davis has said, about effective tracking of learner progress and accurate target setting, and then that professional dialogue at every point through the year with the heads of year, with class teachers, to demand the very best outcomes for those learners. So there are multiple things, but it always goes back, for me, to outstanding teaching and learning in the classroom. And where you have strong teaching and learning, that's underpinned by good attendance for all learners. And that, I think it's about that individualisation, for every learner is treated as an individual to achieve at their level and make the progress that they have the capacity to do. So, but for me, it's teaching and learning. It's about ensuring schools have got a really robust teaching and learning strategy that is well understood, well communicated, and that everything is aligned to delivering high quality provision in the classroom.
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, just one of those things of hopefully can be action to be better, because that's what we strive to be, and hopefully by the next report, hopefully we will see an improvement. And it's just to understand if there is any changes or lessons learned, if you would feed back to us just to say what's happening in relation to that as well, and if we're learning from elsewhere, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I thank you all for coming today? Hopefully the next report will be clearer than this one was, but thank you for clearing the mud for us, because your answers were helpful. The report itself was, let's say, confusing at the very best, but you helped today. You have helped. I don't think, we didn't like the report. The answers are good, in there we got through, but it's just the way it is.
It's the narrative behind the data. That's the data set to provide you with, but it's narrative to give you the confidence that.
Yeah, you see, if we couldn't scrutinise it, we listened.
Yeah.
So we listened to what you're saying, but we can't scrutinise it. We have to listen, because there's nothing for us to scrutinise in sense, because you're working in different, and there's just nothing to get your hands on. It's like an eel, isn't it? It goes all over the place and try to catch you. Sorry.
I was going to say, should I pick up what I've noted as we go through? There's only really the two recommendations that I think I just need a bit of clarity on. Obviously, we've noted about improving the report to make it more accessible to lay people, and obviously Sarah's recommendation of maybe doing a seminar or a workshop around this. Is it that committee would prefer to do a seminar on their understanding, or would you prefer to do a seminar on the data for next year and not have a formal report, or how do you think you prefer to receive that?
Open committee. John? Yes, John?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, personally, if we can have a seminar, I'm all in favour of that. I would personally like it to be able to explain to us the significance of the data and what it's showing us, but also what we can learn from it. At the moment, I'm seeing the data, I'm seeing the numbers and the figures there. I don't necessarily totally understand either what it means or what we're trying to learn from it in terms of moving forward and providing recommendations for future reports. So that's the sort of thing that I'm looking for personally. I don't know whether anybody else agrees or disagrees with that.
Maybe you could speak amongst your staff as well.
I think it'd be helpful to have a seminar on next year's data and have a data workshop around the report. I think the challenge here is in a sense, this data is not supposed to be used to hold people to account, so it's like a contradiction.
No, it is a
It's an
contradiction.
explanation of the data. Which
Yeah.
Yes, so would a seminar session, a workshop session be more helpful to you in understanding that and exploring that data there?
I think so. I don't know.
I think it will have to be earlier because of 2027.
This time next year.
The earliest January.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
at the end of January.
Yeah, this time,
verify
this
data.
time next year would be literally about going into cancellation, so it'd be difficult, but.
It would be.
I think for our forward work programme, I've had a look at next year's, and the March meeting is outside of the pre-election period. So
Just
not-
about.
Yeah.
Would a better question for scrutiny is how do you hold your schools to account in regards to
It's a great
outcomes
question.
in regards to the confidence that they have in the outcomes of their results?
Absolutely great
So
question.
rather than
Yeah.
having the data there as a tool to use to discuss that, actually then scrutinise whoever the cabinet member is and the director of education. How are you confident that schools use their data effectively to?
That's one way. I mean, this report is. Report, but you can't get.
Well, the first paragraph tells you you're not going to scrutinise.
You can't scrutinise it.
Yeah.
So why is it going before a scrutiny committee?
I think
Dilemma.
it's traditionally always
It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
I mean, does it,
And in its original format, you could you could get your teeth in it because there's always comparisons. You can say, well, that's good doing better, and it's wrong. It's a wrong way to manage the data. What you're wanting to do is have confidence that our schools are actually doing the best for their children. That's what you want to know.
we want to hold you to account.
Yeah,
We want to make sure that you're delivering what you've said.
yeah.
And unless we can do that, then we are failing as a scrutiny committee.
Well,
It's as simple as that.
Well, as a scrutiny,
We're failing.
you frame it differently next time. What you want from us. Don't ask me.
Good God, if that's
So-
me then.
But technically it's my
fine,
job, don't
fine.
worry, it's my job, Chair.
Good, thank God for that.
Yeah, I.
Seminar, and I just believe it's you guys to sort out. Sarah,
Yeah.
in unit trust, we have hope.
We'll have a look at data side of this. Yeah.
Or Sarah.
Let's try that.
Yes.
Sorry, Jay, just to addition on to that though, I think if we are doing any public data, can we potentially have a look at writing it as if it was to an ordinary member of the public, not a councillor and things as well? Because if we allow them to understand, it does open up their ability to write into us or what if they want to be involved in our process. At the moment, it's just not easy for them within this. If we don't understand it fully, I don't think it's going to be helpful for the wider community as well. Thank you.
I totally agree with that, Councillor Marshall. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
The general public have access to individual schools' data in
Yes.
this form and in a more simplistic form on my local schools.
Yeah.
So they have access to this data and it's much easier to understand it in an individual school context
Yes.
than in this broad context. So the public do have access and we can direct them to my local schools.
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't agree with what's just been said there, because at the end of the day, as a city, we are obviously elected members and the documents go out to the public. They should be understood by every electorate and the public. So it shouldn't just be about my local school. It should be for every citizen in our city. And that includes those, again, with ability to read and whatnot amongst our citizens. So it should be open to everyone. And if we're going to be transparent and publicising documents, they should be understood by the public. Thank you.
Okay. Beth, sorry, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everybody else. I would look forward to having some sort of seminar or something prior to the next one, because I did myself find it very difficult to understand. I had to keep going back and forth, rereading it through all the time. Listening to everybody's questions and the answers has been very helpful. But yeah, I would find it extremely helpful to have something prior to the next meeting that can put the graphs and everything into a bit more readable situation. I agree with Councillor Marshall that that if we can't understand it, we can't expect residents who want to read that report, they can't understand it either. But on that, I will say, I'll take my hat off to whoever wrote the report, because it's an amazing report, even though I don't understand it. So thank you very much.
And the fantastic work being done. I would agree with that, Councillor Davis, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. John, did you have your hand up? No? No? Okay. On that note, we'll leave it there. We'll release you to go and do what you have to do. And that's the right room to use. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much for keeping up today. Over to you now.
Yes, yeah, my section. So, thank you. If I start with the actions which are sort of go and been presented in the report, there is, thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There's one outstanding that's been escalated. Our forward work programme next meeting, which is going to be the 14th of April, that's been cancelled due to having no items for it. The forward it's invaluable in 14th of April. It would be, but it depends on the item, but we've got no items for it anyway. I've shared the draft forward work programme for next year, haven't received any feedback on it, so I'll just take that as we're content with it for now, but that'll probably have some tweaks after today's meeting, obviously, to reflect the request for a seminar, no problem with that. And then we have one outstanding, and my mistake on the second item that has been accepted. I didn't put the right version of this document in, that is my mistake. But yeah, there's only the one outstanding again, been escalated. Yeah, that's all for me, Chair. Right now.
Right, well,
excuse me, Chair.
Yes, please.
Did you just say that the April the 14th meeting would be cancelled?
Yes.
Well, can we have any training on these papers on that meeting? Save cancelling it?
The cancellation's already technically gone out, but and I don't know if the turnaround would be doable for officers.
Okay, just a thought.
No, yeah, absolutely. I will try and get some training in the diary, well, a seminar in at least, you know, post AGM year, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just before we go, can I just make a very quick suggestion for future meetings? Yes. You know the section in the chat where we all raise our hands? Can I suggest that they get ticked off as and when people speak? Because at the moment there's 5 hands still raised. I know Councillor Marshall had a hand raised earlier. He had to sort of interject because nobody noticed it. The same thing happened to me actually, but I didn't raise it because my question had already been answered. But it is quite difficult to keep track of the hands that are raised and who's actually spoken and who hasn't spoken.
We can look at that. As you know, the problem I have, even though I wear glasses and my eyesight is fantastic. I'm sat such a distance away. I can't even read the chat. So I don't see you guys. So you see what I'm saying? I'm relying on Sam to tell me when the hands come up and people indicate on screen.
We will have to look at it.
Yeah, I just think it'd be easier if they were ticked off when people have spoken. The tick replaces the hand, and then they've been and done.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All the very best to you and enjoy the sunshine. Long day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye. Bye bye.